Remember, remember the 5th of November, the gunpowder, treason, and plot. I know of no reason why the gunpowder treason should ever be forgot.
Hey there, boils and ghouls. Welcome to this week's episode of Hollow Weekly. Nick and George here with a revolution. Actually, multiple revolutions. And now we're on an FBI watch list.
Boo. I was expecting the pitchforks in the crowd, not the FBI. Damn. Really...
Yeah. Bob Mueller's watching this now. He's
good.
But hopefully, maybe he agrees with our list because we are talking about revolutions.
We're recording a podcast that you just said Bob Mueller's watching this right now, which is even creepier than you think.
He's through the window. I'm just like, I can't. I asked him to leave.
The smoke detector light's blinking.
He said his Uber will be here in 20 minutes, but in the meantime, he's going to watch the show.
Okay.
So,
no, really, what are we talking about?
But okay, so today we're recording this on the 5th of November, which if you've seen V for Vendetta, you know that other stuff. They have that Remember 5th of November.
Yes.
And they talk about, there's that line at the end that I really like of ideas are bulletproof,
yes,
or something like that. And that got us thinking.
Yeah, that's my favorite part in the whole movie.
Oh, that line right there gives you chills just thinking about it.
It's so good.
Oh, and
he's like, why won't you die? Why won't you die?
Why won't you die? Why won't you die?
Beneath this mask, there is more than flesh. Beneath this mask, there is an idea, Mr. Creedy. And ideas are bulletproof.
He's like, because behind this mask is more than flesh. It's an idea.
We couldn't remember the name. It was Creedy.
Creedy,
I was calling it Creedy.
Yeah, which is the perfect name for that character.
It is very. But we were thinking about, like, what other types of revolutions.
In honor of Guy Fawkes Day, we are going to talk about revolutions that took place in horror. Some that will be pretty familiar to you, and some that are probably deeper cuts that you may not know or may not know all the details of.
Yeah. But before we get into that, we want to throw in a new segment.
Yes. I'm excited about this.
So this is... What are we calling it? We're lifting it real heavy from it up.
So I'm going to credit it because we're lifting it. And the thing is... We're not lifting it from another horror podcast. We're actually lifting it from a sports podcast. So, like, they're going to have to forgive us. But it's an excellent sports podcast called GM Street on the Ringer Network. Go check it out if you're a sports fan. It's excellent. It's really well done. But they have a segment that they call if you don't know, now you know.
If you so we'll change it. If you haven't inquired...
We don't have a name for this yet, but
we just want to do it. Like, it sounds fun as shit.
We're excited to do it. So, I want to do it like, for most of the episodes, or at least as long as we feel like it's going well. So, but we'll come up with a different name for it. But as of right now, because in honor of our other sitting on the shelf project, the Not Bravo's Bravo list, we've got
Not Bravo's Hollow Weekly's
Not Ringer, right? Okay,
the Not Ringers.
So if you don't know, now you know, and I can start it out because I think I have one more than you, but
yeah.
I'm going to start it with, here's how this goes. If you don't know that in the year 2018, practical effects in horror movies and productions TV is not dead, now you should know. Bingo. If you're watching Channel Zero Dream Door, which is an amazing, we're in another like golden age of horror shows. Like it's reaching back to like True Blood, and then it really started to ramp up, and you get like Hannibal and Bates Motel and all that, like Penny Dreadful, all that amazing stuff. But Channel Zero is, like, for my money, the best horror show on TV right now. And it has a character who might be the breakout horror icon of 2018. Named Pretzel Jack.
With cheese.
Right, with cheese, right? So, but what's cool about this is that they actually built the entire season and kind of like a lot of what they were doing with Channel Zero around the fact that they had discovered a performer named Troy Jones. So Troy Jones is probably familiar to you by sight if you spend any time online, because he pops up in those videos where he's like a contortionist and he turns himself upside down and he terrorizes everyone in the audience.
He's like doing jumping jacks. Like But like his head's like 180.
Right, totally. And the funny thing is that he was on America's Got Talent, and that was the clip that when you Google it, it comes up. But I highly recommend finding the clip of him at the Apollo, where he completely creeps out Steve Harvey
Christ.
so hard. It's amazing. Steve Harvey's like running from him on the stage. And it's perfect. Like, as a horror fan, it's the perfect normie reaction. Like, you want your horror to terrify Steve Harvey. Like, that's the goal. That's the goal.
I could really put myself in Steve Harvey's shoes. Like, I would run just as fast. I'm like, nope.
He times his performance perfect. They put in this great remix of Tainted Love, the song. And as soon as the percussion hits, he just drops to the floor like he got stepped on. He's like totally flat. And the audience is completely disturbed, and like it's great. So they discovered that this guy was here, and then one of the people behind Channel Zero, he had said in an interview, he goes, this is great. He goes, Pretzel Jack gave me the chance to create a slasher character and a Pixar character in one.
That's very cool.
So he was totally excited with it. But everyone who is seeing it online has been like, there's no way that that's not CGI. There's no way. And it is absolutely not CGI. This is practical all the way. It's super terrifying, and it's a great like new addition to the horror like pantheon of modern icons. So if you don't know, the practical effects are still something that people, when they do them well, are amazing in 2018 for horror. Check out this show.
All right, so I only got one. If you don't know, now you do.
Yes.
If you haven't inquired, I think that should be the title. If you
don't know the name of the segment, now you don't.
No, you don't. Still, not official. We're spitballing.
Right.
So if you did not know that Stardust is on Netflix, now you know.
Oh,
now a little backstory.
You went with a Netflix cut.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I remember the trip because Stardust was what, like 2007.
Yes.
Right. I think that was like around Cloverfield and all that stuff. I really didn't. There was hardly any films I cared about. It was mostly some horror stuff. Blah blah blah. So when I saw Stardust, I was like, oh, that looks lame. Space pirates and all this other stuff. But what my dumb brain didn't know at the time was it was written by Neil Gaiman.
Yes, it was.
I had no idea. And so now that I've read some Neil Gaiman, I really love Neil Gaiman.
Yep.
Just watching the first few minutes of the film of like a boy chains himself to a star, like I'm like, wow, that's super Neil Gaiman, and it's awesome. I've missed out on this film. This was my
That's
first.
That's a $70 million budget film.
Is it really?
Yeah.
It's
crazy.
There's some really bad like I like CGI. I'm not one of those people who hate it for no reason, blind animosity towards it.
Right.
But there's some bad CGI Stardust.
Yes.
It doesn't.
It was sort of that era, though.
Yeah, it was like that Van Helsing-ish era. We talked a little bit about that.
Yep.
Van Helsing, weird stuff. Everything's like CGI.
When was I Am Legend?
Around that time, because I think I Am Legend. Right? Yeah, around
That's
that
like
time.
the most aggravating CGI ever. To
Yeah,
me.
those
Legend
years.
is my worst.
So Stardust falls in that. But what Stardust does well is a phenomenal cast. You got Claire Danes playing the star. I forget the guy's name, but he's Daredevil now.
I was looking it up while you were talking just to refresh my memory, and I was like, "Yeah, Nick, I don't know about this. You should have picked a movie with a better cast because all this had was Sienna Miller, Ricky Gervais, Robert De Niro, Michelle Pfeiffer, Peter O'Toole, and narration by Ian McKellen.
Yeah,
Sir Ian McKellen.
Yeah,
that's all.
So you could imagine my face watching it for the first time. I just kept looking over at Alex, and I was like, "Why don't they make more movies like this?" Like as a horror podcast, it's not the first thing from horror because we have Michelle Pfeiffer as a witch, and there's some weird stuff in there. Sure. Oh, and Robert De Niro was so great as the gay pirate. I did not see that coming, and I loved it. I loved every bit of it, and his crew like loving him at the end. They're like, "We knew." Oh, such a good movie. I wish they would do more of Neil Gaiman stuff.
It made $136 million.
So it did okay.
It doubled its budget.
Okay.
Not spectacular, but it did pretty well.
Yeah, but if you didn't know, it's on there, and if you like Neil Gaiman but haven't read this one, which if you like Neil Gaiman, you've probably already seen it. I was just super late on that.
I don't know about that because I like Neil Gaiman, and I didn't know that it was a Neil Gaiman movie when I watched it.
Oh, okay. So maybe there's some people out there.
It kind of slipped under the
Okay, well, if you like Neil Gaiman, check this out. Like I love the shit out of it. I want more of that. Do that with the Graveyard Book.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, that'd be killer. All right, so that's all I got for
all
this.
right, I've only got one more if you don't know, now you know, is that Bram Stoker
Oh, this is cool.
has a great grandnephew with the coolest name ever, second coolest name ever, right behind Bram, which is Dacre. And Dacre Stoker has written a book called Dracul, which is a prequel to friggin' Dracula. Actually co-wrote it. And it's really good. And it's really atmospheric. And for some reason, it's not showing up on any horror list. It didn't show up anywhere for Halloween. It didn't show up anywhere for our horror book club, which, by the way, if you haven't joined our book club on Facebook,
Join the book club.
Please do, because we're looking for readers who appreciate the dark in life. But so it's a really atmospheric thing, well done book. It's a beautiful. I got the hardcover, so it's a beautiful cover, it's a beautiful edition. And it's got the actual Bram Stoker notes from like the creation of Dracula and the study of Dracula in the back. So, I mean, it's just for that alone, it's kind of worth a purchase, right? But then you've got this amazing new novel, which is a prequel to the legendary Dracula, and it's out and no one's talking about it. So, boom, go get this.
We got to do a few posts for that. We got to put the shit out of that in the page.
Totally. Because
it's Dacre?
Yeah, and it's super... Oh, I might not be saying it right, but that's what
But still, like, they sound like vampire hunters.
Totally, right?
Like,
they absolutely do.
Like, if there's, like, you know, not the Illuminati, but, like, a society of blood relatives to Van Helsing, and someone named Dacre Stoker comes up, I'm like, I bet you got holy water in your car, just in case.
Totally. Absolutely amazing. So it's a really interesting, it's got actual scary moments. It's got tons of atmosphere. It's pretty much everything The Nun wanted to be, but in print and actually pulling it off, unlike The Nun. So check it out.
Well, The Nun did pull it off financially.
Yeah, that's true.
So no one's heard of this.
Yeah, Dacre would trade it.
Yeah,
I'm sure
Dacre's like, I took some of that Nun cheddar. Yo, Blumhouse.
If I was starting a horror band, Nun Cheddar is probably...
Nun cheddar. Oh, no.
It's probably the name I would go with.
Yeah, that's pretty dark.
All right, so we hope you enjoyed that new not named segment. We'll revisit that in a future incarnation.
We'll just put a little blank.
It's all good.
We'll put blank there. Just fill in your own name. If you're listening to this, we'll just leave a blank spot. Jeopardy music, and then like I'm calling this segment blank.
I love it. Good.
That's what we work. And also, while we're segmenting over to the main show, if you look down at your shirt and you decide this sucks, and you look at your mug and you go, that sucks, and you look at the buttons you have on your satchel and you go, that sucks, go to HoloWeekly.com.
Yes.
What we got there? We got the buttons you need. We got the mugs you need. Quality mugs. We got the shirts. Good shirts. I remember picking them out online thinking, if it's that like hard cotton, I'm a flip. You know what I mean? Where it's like the t-shirts that don't really like, they don't hug my hips like the other ones do.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But then they came in and everyone's like,
you mean they suck?
they suck. But the ones on HoloWeekly.com, once we got some orders in, I even remember my friend messaged me and was like, it fits like a unicorn fur or something like that. And I was like, yeah. That's the sign of good. That's what I want.
That's what we wanted.
And then my sample came and I put it on. I was like, yeah, this is that good shit. So check that out. We got new designs going up all the time. Check all of them out. That's HoloWeekly.com.
Nice.
So you say you want a revolution.
Yes.
Isn't that what the Beatles said?
Yes.
Wasn't that a Beatles? All I remember was that homeless man screaming, love, 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 love. That's what the Beatles said at Studio City. And some guy in a business suit got up and walked away. And I was like, what a stiff.
What the hell?
Why are you going to get... He's just preaching love. And then he got real close to me and I went, I got to get out of here. I got to go.
That was some karma.
I don't know what he's about. All right. So we have some revolutionary ideas, revolutionary things.
Yes.
That has happened in horror.
Yes.
So...
Start us out.
So I'm going to start. We just have these ideas, and this is my miscellaneous idea that I have.
We don't have to follow any rules. It's Guy Fawkes Day. Come on.
It's a revolution.
You
just make that shit up.
Exactly.
So I'm putting this under like, this is like a comet, like that just smashed Earth of creativity.
Okay.
That I think, and I think
changed its orbit.
I think this studio not only changed horror, but I think they changed like film in general with what they were able to accomplish before CGI and other stuff. And that is this Stan Winston. Yes. Stan Winston studio. I mean, my goodness. Jurassic Park, Aliens, the Terminator, so much shit. Like, it just blows my mind. And Monster Squad. I mean, there's just the list goes on and on and on. And the thing is there's a lot of makeup companies are fantastic. Like, they do great work. A lot, because, like, I was debating, do I put Jack or Dick Smith?
Sure.
I almost did Dick Smith.
Sure.
And I was like, he did Brando and The Godfather, Exorcist, like Ghost Stories.
Ghost Story, right?
Yeah, Ghost Stories. Good stuff. And I wanted to put him on there. But I was like, in terms of people who, like, made the industry realize who the top dog is, it was Stan Winston without a doubt. Mm-hmm. And even just, like, I remember on Bravo's Countdown, they had Jurassic Park on there. And he was like, we didn't try to make the dinosaurs scary. We just tried to make them as accurate as what our findings are.
Turns out dinosaurs are really scary.
And it turns out they're fluffy, so they're covered in feathers now, which makes it a little weird.
Yeah, true.
But regardless, just in terms of the scope of what they were able to accomplish. And here's the thing. In terms of revolution, I think behind these, which is funny because this will be our Guy Fawkes, there's always the one central person who led it. And that I can point that to Stan Winston. But what I think makes it so revolutionary is I've watched a lot of, like, behind the scenes makeup stuff, and there's a lot of really fucking talented people out there.
Totally.
But there was something about it, and I think there's only like two other people who I've ever had this feeling for, like, listening to them talk. It was Stan Winston and Wes Craven, and maybe one other person. Maybe it was Tom Savini, but I'll put him on the back burner. But it's when they talk, you can tell that they are talking about what they do with just pure passion for the art. And I know everyone else, it's their art. It's like, it's not saying what everyone else does is less, but there's just this genuine excitement for what they create when they talk about it. And
totally.
That is any interview with Stan Winston is just that. He always seems so thrilled, so up to date, so happy to do.
Not jaded.
Yeah, not jaded, to be doing what he's doing and leading. And it's that enthusiasm that I think led him through the industry to create these, like, amazing Pumpkinhead. Like, it's just it's totally. that kind of shit. Predator.
He was on such a roll.
Yeah, and so I think what his studio did was they changed. I think they literally changed, like, shit we're able to see in film.
Right.
Jurassic Park being the one of the big things.
And they were super influential.
And it was good. And you don't look at a Stan Winston design and think that did not come out of love. Even if you look at how they recreated the Universal monsters for Monster Squad.
Sure.
That's like the primo example, is they didn't want to completely change the wheel. They wanted to pay homage and update it and then have enough room to put their artistic integrity
That
into
had to
it.
be so tough to get right, too.
But they nailed it. They absolutely nailed it. None of those designs look bad.
Because that's so intimidating to try to, like, redo that.
Yeah, but his studio was able to knock that out. And I think, you go, I mean, even with, like, Jurassic Park just being a big one. Like,
well, yeah, he was also behind The Thing, which is probably, like, it was one of those, I mean, ironically for our V for Vendetta inspiration, it was a revolution that took time.
Yeah.
It didn't work out right away, but then it kind of, like,
but even
got more and more momentum until, now it's considered one of the best creature features of all time, literally, like, in the top 5 has to be, right? So
yeah, so it just Aliens. I could go on and on about how crazy the designs are, but I think something definitely shifted its course with Stan Winston.
Well, I have a monster from my first revolution too. My monster is a little older than that, though. He is Quasimodo from 1923's Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Handsome feller.
And you know what's amazing here is the reason I consider this a revolution is because I consider this to be the first true Universal monster film.
I do too. I'm right there with you.
Right, like Phantom it was sort of a dead end. I mean,
I still consider Phantom in my heart, though.
Totally.
I know they do the Invisible Man. What's his name? Version
Rains.
Claude Rains.
Yep.
Phantom. Mm-hmm. I like to throw Lon Chaney in there.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's the thing is, and Hunchback is literally the movie that made Lon Chaney a star. It was a much bigger budget movie than people think it is for what it was, and it was a lot more epic in scope, like, of its time. But it was the thing that put Lon Chaney on the map. So just for that alone, that's a super revolutionary thing for horror. But then to start what was basically that universal template where the monsters, you were sort of on their side a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. They were the first ones who really figured out how to do that. The Wolfman was sympathetic. The Mummy was sympathetic. Dracula was not sympathetic, but he was charming, right? Mm-hmm. So you were sort of on his side in the way you would be on Lecter's side. Like Lecter has no redeeming qualities, right? Except for he's super smart, but
charming.
But exactly, that's the thing. So they took that formula, plus again looping back to what we were talking about before about just the ultimate in practical effects. Obviously, Lon Chaney is a genius at that, and he was sort of starting a revolution of his own just with that. But it also did an interesting thing where Hunchback of Notre Dame. So the Hunchback of Notre Dame 1923 Lon Chaney version is the third adaptation of that concept. So Hunchback was hot IP like back then, like, and so it was the third one. But then there were more remakes, including one in I think 39, which would have been the same time that more Frankensteins were coming down the pipe, right? So it was a universal monster film, tons of atmosphere, sympathetic anti-hero / villain. Based off a literary property, just like Frankenstein and Dracula, which are both amazing novels. And then on top of all that, it started the whole remake kind of what we would call extended universe now, right? Mm-hmm. So because, and this is, I don't know, it's going to be 100 years old, like 5 years from now. So, dang. And the performance is still absolutely amazing. And it's funny because when you're watching it, you're thinking to yourself, like you're on Quasimodo's side. We're way more, aware of a lot of the issues you get from judging people by their appearances and stuff than they were in 1923. So you're sort of even more invested than I imagine the original audiences would have been. And still, like when he starts pouring like molten lead on the heads of the people coming at the tower, you're like, wow, he actually is a monster, like in a way, right? Too. So it's got a really, really interesting. It's way ahead of its time for what it was. So that's my first revolution. It started the whole dark universe monster, universal monster thing, which is Universal Monsters is still like the cornerstone of horror to me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm just real caught up on molten lead. You're just like, what's that?
Oof. Oh, and then by the way, because we also have a trivia group on Facebook, an amazing trivia fact that I wanted to just mention that stems out of this movie, which is absolutely impossible to believe, but seems to be true, is that it was just an enormous movie. The set was 20 acres, right? It had 750 crew members, but the night sequences, so they built a life-size replica of Notre Dame Cathedral. Like literally the same size, right? So this is 1923. They're not fucking around. And then this movie apparently still holds the record for the movie that employed the most electricians on a film, over 250, to shoot the night sequences in this movie. Can you imagine, like, if you think to yourself, like, what movie would have the most electricians on it? You would think, like, Avatar or, like, whatever. You would never, ever in a million years think, like, Lon Chaney, 23, Hunchback of Notre Dame. Mind-boggling. Anyway, go ahead. What's your next revelation?
Man, they probably had to draw a lot of power.
Right? Like, oof. But it probably wasn't a lot of power. It was just a lot of power for them. Right? Like in amps, it was probably like super small.
But with those old ass balls, can you imagine being Lon Chaney in that makeup?
Right? That was a 70-pound just the hunch, and then the suit itself.
I've heard disputes about that. I watched there was a thing I saw where some people were like,
but maybe it didn't weigh that much.
Yeah, they're like,
it looks. The claim was that he couldn't physically stand up when he was in full gear. But who knows if that's really true.
I forget what I was watching. It was with some horror makeup people. And they were like, we've heard differently.
Yeah, well.
It's not worth hurting your back. Actually, it was the 20s. Get me out of there.
That's right.
I don't want to be there. All right.
So
now I'm going to go with another revolutionary in horror, and which is great because we're getting more of what he started next year. I'm going to go with Rod Serling and the Twilight Zone.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly Twilight Zone.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and I was thinking about this today, like, we have next year Jordan Peele's Twilight Zone. And I'm super excited for it because I loved Get Out. I love the Twilight Zone. So if you put two things I like together, that should be
Key and Peele.
Yeah,
So
I love Key and Peele.
You trust, right?
Yeah, so I feel like this will be good. But so far, historically, with what we've been given for Twilight Zone, it has been that good, which I think is mind-boggling because that shit came out in the 50s,
Right.
and I was thinking to me like, you have the blueprint to make the Twilight Zone. You have Rod Serling. I mean, maybe replicating his voice is gonna be very difficult because it's coming from a genius.
Totally.
But like ideally, in terms of production, like you have the blueprints how to make a Twilight Zone episode, and people still couldn't do it.
Nope.
Even in the John Landis one, I didn't know. I totally did not know that Steven Spielberg directed one of the shorts in that one.
Yep.
And I think it was
Actually, I'm a big fan of the movie, but nothing feels like the
It
original.
doesn't feel like it.
Right.
And I know, like, but the remake of the 20,000 or the Beast, whatever, is great. I like John Lithgow.
Totally.
But what he was able to do, and that still hasn't really been able to be replicated, blows my mind.
Totally.
Because you think after it's been done, you should be able to look at it and go, "Oh, I can do that. It's already been done."
You could reverse engineer it. It doesn't seem that complicated.
And people have it.
But yeah, and it's amazing because we had mentioned this. I think I can't remember if it was during one of our Facebook Lives or actual podcast episode. But Rod Serling, if you had to do the patron saint thing, right, where these patron saints for everything, you have patron saint for travel, patron saint for pets, right? The patron saint for writers. For horror, or even more than horror, honestly, for TV writing, should probably be Rod Serling. He put more credit and thought and protection and encouragement and not interfering and letting writers do what they do best in the Twilight Zone series. It was like a safe space for writers at the time, right? And I think that's really, really hard to duplicate at any time. You think you can take apart the formula and redo it, but if you don't have the culture behind it, like if the SNL writing room isn't working, even if you come up with funny ideas, you can't execute them on Saturday.
Yeah.
Right. So like he had a unique culture that he created that I think is really, really hard to recreate, especially since writers have gotten less and less respect over time, not more. Right?
Yeah. And the other thing is with the Twilight Zone, like the issues it was taking over, which I remember in the group, some guy was like getting weird because it had to deal with politics. He was like, Twilight Zone never dealt with like politics or something like that. And I'm like, dude, just like a quick Google search of Rod Serling will surely fill you in.
Yes, totally.
But here's the thing is with his stories though in the Twilight Zone, and why I still think they hold up today is because they don't, a lot of the shows in those times, I think maybe Twilight Zone and maybe because I watched an interview, the Andy Griffith Show probably might be the only two where like they didn't treat the audience like they were completely fucking stupid.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, you can't talk down to the audience, and then, if you look at other things around, the weird thing is that Twilight Zones were funny at times.
Yeah,
there was humor in there, but it was never. I don't know. There's something. The only thing I can point to, like when you watch Tales from the Dark Side or Tales from the Crypt or Outer Limits or, any of those things or whatever, there's something about Rod Serling where you can just feel like you're dealing with someone who's on a mission. But he's not on a mission in a way that's annoying. He's not shouting a message.
He's like walking with purpose.
He's on a personal mission. I saw a thing where I'm actually reading a biography of Ulysses S. Grant, right?
Yeah.
It's by the guy who wrote the book, The Hamilton, that they turned into music.
Yeah.
And he said that they were talking about some of the generals that were living. And he was like, what made Grant special? And he goes, he's one of the inevitables. Like if he decides he's gonna end up somewhere, he inevitably will end up there. If he wants to be on the other side of Gettysburg, it's inevitable that he'll get there, right? And calling him the Inevitables just stuck with me. Right?
That is a bitchin' name. Well, I think Rod Serling's nickname.
What was his nickname?
If I read the right information online, was the Angry Man in Hollywood.
Right. Yeah. Totally.
And I'm like, damn, that's a cool title.
Which doesn't immediately come off because he seems so calm.
But you can see it though. No. Calm, cool, and collected looked like what you saw on his face.
Totally right.
Pure.
But that's what I mean is that mission thing. But he was one of the Inevitables. Like he was one of those people who were like, I'm going to leave TV better than I found it. And nothing was going to stop him.
The way I see it, I also view Rod Serling as like a horror version of George Carlin.
Oh, cool.
Like in the way he articulates his view to the audience. He really examines it and then brings it back, and then he hands you off the information.
Totally.
He's like, I walked through it with you.
Totally.
Here it is. Think about it. see if you want to be a better person. And that's how every Twilight Zone episode is.
That's awesome.
So that's my revolution.
Totally a revolution, and a revolution that should have a bigger impact, because
hopefully
you should value the writers.
Well, hopefully with Jordan Peele's
with
version.
the reboot.
Yeah. Hopefully that does it right.
That feel will come back. I totally agree. So I'm gonna do a weird, in honor of Guy Fawkes, I'm gonna do a weird sort of failed revolution here. It's not a fail. That's harsh. I'll explain. So I'm going with the book I Am Legend by the writer Richard Matheson. Right. There's something really special about this. So first of all, this book was just voted, or recently voted, best vampire novel of the last 100 years or whatever. It beat out Salem's Lot. It beat out a whole bunch of other things, whatever. In this by this website, and they contacted Anne Rice of Interview with the Vampire fame, and she was like pissed that she lost. And they're just like, "What did I lose to?" And they're like, "I Am Legend." And she's like, "Okay." When it's that amazing and it's intimidating even to them, there's something really special about it. But here's why I find it a really interesting revolution that happened, that I think quietly influenced a lot of people but wasn't immediately obvious, right? So I Am Legend is first of all, it has never been properly adapted for film, right? So that means one of the things I like when I think of revolution, like the revolutionary concept, I think of things that are not really settled, they're ongoing. Like the American Revolution is really still happening, right? If you think about it, because they were like, we're going to start a revolution and set up a country and see if it works. Now we're seeing if it works. We're like in the seeing if it works phase, right? Of what they did. So I Am Legend came out and goes, what if you flipped it and you made it so that you're telling the story from the point of view of a character that you think is the hero, and it turns out he's the villain, right? So you've had a lot of ones with unreliable narrators, and you've had a lot of ones told from sort of the POV of I mean, let's be honest, they're usually not, up till Matheson, because this is 50s, right? Like most of them are told from the point of view, like Dracula is told from the point of view of the people Dracula is fighting, the good people.
Yeah.
Right? Frankenstein has POV from the monster, but he's not really bad. Right?
Yeah, he's just being him.
He's just doing his thing, right? So I Am Legend is told from the point of view of the hero who turns out to be the monster.
Yeah.
Or one of the monsters, a version of the monster, right? And because it did this radical thing, everyone who went to film it had to make a decision. That's amazing. Can we pull that off? And they've all chickened out. Like no one's ever really tried to film it the way it's filmed. They asked Richard Matheson, who was sort of happy with the Will Smith I Am Legend. He said, he said literally, it's not my book, but it was a fun movie.
Yeah.
Right. So like, I mean, sort of okay. Like, what is that in baseball? A single, and then right. So then Last Man on Earth with Vincent Price is another single. It's a pretty good movie, but it's pretty deviant from the.
What about Omega Man?
And Omega Man is just like, I don't know how that's not a campy horror musical, because that's the campiest movie I've ever seen acting serious, but totally not serious. Like it was Ed Wood style level camp. With some authentically scary moments and like whatever. But the true revolution here is this. So I am Richard Christian Matheson, who's Richard Matheson's son, had written an introduction that really impacted me to one of the anniversaries of the novel. And he was talking about how haunted he was with the fact that the whole blood motif, the way it's handled in I Am Legend and what it does to society and what it brings out in people, whatever, was really coming along right before the AIDS era hit. Right. So it became like this exploration of like kind of real pain and in the real world, like, which is something that I think is really getting explored to the hilt now in 2018. There was a great article online. I think it was the Faculty of Horror co-host, but it could have been someone else. But they had said what was 2018 in horror about? Sum it up in one word: trauma. Right. So like you're exploring the trauma of characters, like Hereditary, the trauma of being in a family and that kind of life story. And if you go through, and Revenge was
Revenge is woof.
Right. And Hill House is the trauma of going through that kind of childhood with that kind of thing. So it's really been a centerpiece of where horror is moving. Even Quiet Place, really, spoiler for the beginning, starts with trying to get over the trauma of losing one of your family members like right away, and how that puts up divisions in the family that they spend the whole rest of the movie working out, right? So like this is really in vogue for horror now. And I Am Legend was one of the first ones that threw like a really, really big modern flag down and said, I own this ground. Like this isn't like we're gonna deal with trauma, we're gonna deal with what you go through when you're that level of alone. Right. And that's one of the things that Richard Matheson said about Will Smith's performance. He goes, I think he really got across how much it would break you down to just be that alone. Like he did a good job with that, right? Which I agree with. So it's a book that is still stands tall over all its adaptations, where you can't look at something and say, this was anyone got near it yet. And it's still causing like this influence of not only the trauma part of it, but obviously being one of the best vampire novels of all time. I think the whole vampire revolution is like one of the biggest things in horror. So anyway, I think it's an amazing book, and I think I'm looking forward to the year eventually where some genius pulls it off as a movie.
Yeah,
has not happened yet.
Someday will happen. Maybe we'll make a cut of Omega Man, Last Man on Earth, this, like the best parts, and then try to tell a narrative.
Totally. I mean, there are good parts in each.
It'll be very confusing, but I think it'll be interesting.
Yes.
Totally. And then at the end of the credits, we'll be like, Nick and George finally made it happen. They are legend. That's how we'll end.
They are legend.
They are the monsters because they put this piece of shit together.
It's on. All right. What's your...
All right. So what's
changing the world next?
I was going to do my director that changed the world, but I want to get my actor to change the world out of the way.
Okay.
Because there's not a lot to say because it's pretty obvious.
Yes.
And this is hard. I started.
Sure.
I was really racking my brain for this one today, thinking like, okay, what was a revolutionary performance? Mm-hmm. But like in my heart is revolutionary. Not that I liked it, because there's a lot that I loved.
Sure.
A Split, when he's changing personalities right in front of the lady, like that's definitely high up there. Mm-hmm. Get Out with Daniel was it Kaluuya? Is that his name? He was fantastic. Hereditary, like there's been just this past few years some really dope performances, but
totally
none of them. And then I went all the way back. I was gonna go with someone like Vincent Price. Vincent Price was my original pick.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were doing.
It was, and I was like, because Vincent Price, he did the horror thing, but he also had such personality that went with him off screen, and I was gonna do that.
Sure,
but I couldn't nail down one Vincent Price performance, because for me, Vincent Price isn't one character. He's Vincent Price. He's the persona. He's the voice. He's the exactly.
Totally.
So I was like, okay, well, that's not really one. So what's one that really, really knocked me out the first time I saw it? Mm-hmm. And I was like, is it Bates, Norman Bates? And I was like, I feel like that's getting close. Like okay, so I'll have him take over for Vincent Price. But I was like, who would take over that? And then naturally, Anthony Hopkins. Oh yeah. Hannibal came in. And I was gonna bring in his Van Helsing too, because I was rewatching some clips from Bram Stoker, and he was able to let Van Helsing breathe. Like he wasn't just so serious all the time. And seeing Van Helsing cut loose really makes him just seem way more human. Totally. Like when she's like, "What happened to Lucy?" and he just like kind of like puts his fork down and it cuts to them, and he's just beat, and her severed head's just sitting there. Totally. One guy's like doing a little like
he's
Catholic
totally insane in that movie.
Yeah.
He is Van
so
Helsing,
you know what? I'll count both in there, because Van Helsing alone.
It's a great.
And I was rewatching the scene where Dracula's wives come to take Winona Ryder, and he takes the fire around her, and then they kill his horse, and he like covers his eyes, and then as soon as they go to sleep, he just chops all their heads off, screams, and throws the. I was like, I love that about him. He's just like, this hurts, but as soon as you're asleep,
Yep.
like and that's what I liked about it. They let him breathe, they let him have some comedy, but when he was serious, you're like, all right,
Yeah.
I definitely went on my side. But the big enchilada here is Hannibal Lecter.
Yes.
And it's one of those things, like, you know, they always say great villains, you know, you don't give them a lot of screen time. They always talk about like Jaws and Michael Myers. Even though I rewatched Halloween on Shudder when they had it 24/7, I forgot how much Michael Myers is in that movie. He is always
he is in the movie quite a bit.
I forgot that he's always like 30 feet behind her.
Yep.
Like he's never without earshot. But like, so great villains usually have pretty less screen time and they make a bigger impact. And which one? Name me like two others that are bigger than Anthony Hopkins.
As actors or for the Hannibal the role?
Actors in general, just.
I mean, he's got to be one of the most accomplished actors to ever.
If I can't think of one I can't think of one above it. If I really rack my brain, I could probably think of one that's either equal levels or just a little bit under.
Like, yeah, when you count success in mainstream or non-horror movies and the horror movies combined, like he's definitely got to be one of the top whoever did a horror movie.
Yeah, and that was part of my reason.
Because like Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi, they're obviously like
Yeah.
equally legendary and equally as talented as him, but they never were mainstream actors, really.
And that was another thing that I was putting towards why I think Hannibal Lecter and Anthony Hopkins for horror was just so revolutionary. Was in my eyes, it was the first, because Silence of the Lambs like swept
Yep.
the Oscars.
Yep.
And I think for a genre that was literally there when they started making movies, it took Anthony Hopkins and the rest of his team for them to finally be like,
It took to what, 90, 91?
91 for them to be like, oh, you're serious. Mm-hmm. And it's all because Anthony Hopkins just gave Silence of the Lambs a little twang.
Yep.
He was just like, I'm gonna be so reserved.
Well, the weird thing is, and it's funny that you said it that way, because that's really an interesting point about it, is that what horror lacks to the Oscar idiots is respectability, right? Or traditionally, that's what it's lacked. Who knows what they think it lacks now, but for decades and decades, it was respectability. And that, even like Carl Laemmle, when he was launching Universal horror movies, he was like, we don't really want to be associated with this, right? Like,
yeah.
Like, but there's something about Lecter playing that super suave, sophisticated character who could name who wrote symphonies and what the best wine pairings were and all that. It kind of somehow bled respectability through to the rest of the movie.
He Frasiered
He
the
totally,
Academy.
like, right? Like, and they were like, maybe this movie is respectable. It's weird how he did that. It's weird that it went that way, right? But it was, I'm convinced it's partly because the movie got stolen by a character who was very, very cultured and sophisticated, which the Oscar people probably think they are. So it made it okay to vote for somehow. Like, I don't know what happened.
And keep in mind, he did this. He did that whole performance so slick, and he's not in the film hardly at all.
16 minutes, I think, when I looked it up.
Yeah, that's
out of what, 2 and 1 hour? It's 2
like 2 hours or something like that. All he needed was 16 minutes
Yep.
to be the big brother for horror, to just beat him up in front of the whole playground and go, see,
Yep.
this is what we can do,
Which is
right
absolutely
here.
terrifying. And you know, along the things, because I love anecdotes like this, but he terrified Jodie Foster in real life. Like, when he was in character, he was terrifying. He was terrifying to the people on the set. He was terrifying to her. She was intimidated. She was like, I mean, he was just doing it, right? Like, that's amazing that he could do that.
It's insane. But there's I mean, there are like iconic roles in horror, but I just don't think any of them did for the genre what Anthony Hopkins did as Hannibal Lecter.
No, it's I mean, there's never been better. There's been equal, but there's never been better. But that's
gold standard.
Yeah, just from the awards, the standpoint of putting horror on the map in terms of deserving shit like that, which still hasn't really paid off yet. But hopefully this year, Toni Collette will win. You know,
God, I hope.
right?
I
But
hope.
because that's deserved too. But yeah, that's the thing is, I think it definitely changed that, and I think it also changed the fact that there was a way to look at horror movies in terms of from that psychological angle, right? Because horror has a lot of like the mad scientist announcing their plans, or the the mysterious killer figures who you don't really get to know, like, because they're sort of enigmatic, right? Like, but Lecter was someone who the whole movie was told from the angle of that kind of examination standpoint of you got to look at things more closely.
But that's basically like that was my standard. Like, which one do I think? I keep thinking of them as like comets just slamming into Earth, like changing the direction. And I think that one, was that, especially coming out of the slasher stuff.
Yep.
Like, talk about hitting the brakes hard.
Totally.
that film's like, stop. We're going to make them a little longer.
So let me give you an old school revolution one where based on a guy who actually died fighting in an actual revolution. How's that?
What?
How's that for you? Watch this.
Everyone's fighting a personal revolution.
No, this was a political revolution,
right?
right? He literally died way too young going to Greece to fight for the Greek Revolution, right? So
what year was the Greece Revolution?
I'm not sure. My computer's powered down, but I'm gonna say 1830s for this guy, but that could be.
I'm not gonna be able to place this person.
That could be different.
I'm not gonna be able to place
You
this
might
person.
be surprised. It depends on what you've seen. So I'm gonna go with George Gordon, Lord Byron. He's a poet.
Lord Byron.
Lord Byron. He's a poet, and
That's my dad's name.
and yes, and he was considered to be one of the most famous and scandalous people of his time. So if you could mix like Elvis with Kim Kardashian, that was like his effect on Europe. So let me give you just a tiny background on this guy. He was part of the big romantic poet revolution, which if you did high school or college lit, you like the people like Keats and Shelley and all those. He was that era. He was a really dramatic, really, really driven guy. He was sort of born, I think, with a clubbish foot, but he made himself become like an amazing athlete just out of spite, right? Like he was basically Bruce Wayne. Okay, so he was super rich. He was talented in a million things. He didn't take anything seriously. He was anti-authority. He was anti-rules. He was anti-whatever. There were rumors floating around Europe that he was having an affair with his sister, right? So like he was called Mad, Bad, and Dangerous to Know. That was
Mad, Bad,
and Dangerous to Know. That was the thing about him, right?
What do I got to do to get Mine right now would be like he's kind of cool,
kind of chill,
talks a lot, and it would be all right.
It'll be all right, and it'll be all right. So, but here's the thing: he gets together with Percy Bysshe Shelley and his friends and whatever, and they during a stormy night they have a storytelling competition. You might know.
I thought that was going to complete.
No, you might know where this is going now, right? Because during the storytelling competition, they challenge each other to write the scariest thing they can overnight around a campfire. And they write these tales, and then they read them to each other. And it turns out that they literally were taking it seriously as a competition. They were going to read the tales and then judge them on their scare impact and how well they were put together. And a girl who I suspect was going to do well for herself later in her career, named Mary Shelley, wrote Frankenstein. Fucking Frankenstein at this writing competition, or at least the germ of it, right? So she won.
What were the other stories?
Okay, here you go. So George Gordon, Lord Byron, he wrote a story called A Fragment. Not catchy, right? Like a terrible name. Oof. So he did A Fragment, and A Fragment was the loser of this competition. So remember, Frankenstein wins, right? And he writes A Fragment. So he thinks, I got a good idea here, but I don't know if I did a good enough job with it. So I'll just, whatever, I'll put it aside. But his other friend who was at the get together was like, no, that's a really good idea. I bet it could have beat Frankenstein if you just changed it like this. So he called it The Vampire. It's the first story about vampirism in English. And it started the vampire craze that became Dracula and everything else. So literally, George Gordon, Lord Byron writes a vampire story with a vampire in it, but gives up on it because Frankenstein was better. His friend takes it and finishes it, turns it into the vampire, spelled Vampyre, right? And then it becomes a craze in Europe that culminates in Dracula. And then George Gordon, Lord Byron, goes to Greece because he's upset with how that country is being treated and dies in Greece fighting for the revolution. So literally when we were doing a revolutionary thing, he started the vampire branch of horror in English, but didn't think it was good enough, so tossed it away. In the same night, basically Dracula and Frankenstein were created.
Wow. So. How bad was that third story then? Was that the Wolfman?
I got to look up the third story. So not a lot of people know this because a lot of people have seen parts of Bride of Frankenstein, but they've never actually watched the movie, right? But the movie actually starts in a flashback scene where the woman, the amazing actress who plays the Bride of Frankenstein, Elsa Lanchester, she is playing Mary Shelley. And then there's three men around her and they're kidding her like, how could you write something so blood-curdling, so horrible, like dead bodies brought back to life and sacrilege and like whatever. And the three men are playing, if you look at the credits, one of them is Lord Byron. So they're trying to reenact.
Did he have a clubfoot?
Yeah, maybe. At the beginning of Bride of Frankenstein is actual sort of a reenactment of the aftermath of that writing competition.
That's cool.
After, right?
I like that.
Which is super cool. And they also did a really kind of little-known crazy movie called Gothic set during that writing competition. So they've actually made a movie about this, I think late 80s, right? So, but it didn't get very much attention. So, writing competitions are not cinematic like gold.
Not unless you have Danny Boyle direct it.
Right, exactly.
I feel like he could make that shit real interesting.
He totally could. Danny Boyle, do it.
He did it with Who Wants to Make a Millionaire.
So I went with an actual revolutionary for this revolution.
Okay, so mine has nothing to do with an actual revolution.
Fair enough.
I mean, maybe his impact. Well, I mean, his impact is why I put him on the list.
Yes.
So I guess that's the caveat I'm going with this.
Yes.
But I went with the director. Now, this was pretty difficult. I
bet.
But I went so strong with my gut on this one.
I can't wait to hear this is.
Okay, so for the director, I was sitting there going like, okay, it was another one of those like performances. It was like, is it because I really like their body of work?
Right.
I like how they interview. You know, I like their input on life or something like that. I was like, no. It needs to be bigger than that. Mm-hmm. It needs to be all of that.
Yes.
It needs to be. I like listening to talk. I like their point of view on things. I like how they inspire other people. And for a hot second, I was going to put Robert Rodriguez because of his just like run and gun, hit the ground running sort of style.
So you're looking at everything outside the movie frame. You're looking at how they live their life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. For the real people.
Love it. Yes.
For people like Hannibal, he's kind of just bound to what's been written.
Totally.
So I combined all of it. And I was like, who is someone that I think is absolutely awe-inspiring that I can listen, talk to for hours and hours and hours? Definitely I'm going to have on the show at some point in time. It's inevitable. He will definitely be on here. This is good. They're alive. Okay, yeah, that was the other thing. I was like, and then I almost made it Romero.
Yes.
But I was like, but who's someone who can also put in like, I don't know, shit you want to believe in into the movie? And so I ended up with Guillermo del Toro.
Nice.
And here's my main reasoning why.
Totally.
Because a lot of people, you know, like whenever my favorite horror director of all time, I think I have to go with Wes Craven because I like his films and I like listening to him talk about his craft.
Yep.
Guillermo del Toro is like that, but like on acid or some shit.
Totally.
Like it is absolutely fantastic to listening to him. But I was thinking about like how much of an enthusiast he is for his own imagination. Like he is his biggest fan for those things. And he sees it through. That's the crazy part. Half the shit that you couldn't even imagine, like thinking of. Not only has he thought it, but he shot it, he edited it, and he gave you Pan's Labyrinth. Like holy crap!
That's amazing.
How is that actually possible? But he has this. I don't know. And he's definitely in horror.
Yep.
You know, because even listening to him, I think it was on Bravo's Countdown. Funny how that, because Bravo's Countdown was going to eat up all next year.
Yep.
Talking about how he made friends with the monsters because he had like shag carpet.
I love that part.
And just listening to that and then seeing him being able to put that love for the monsters he made friends with in film.
He's the best mix of genre fan and director in terms of talent. Like he's literally the perfect, the seesaw is balanced perfectly, right? Because I've noticed that some of the directors I really, really like in horror, like not horror directors, but people who have done movies in horror, like Stanley Kubrick, aren't really fans of the genre. Matter of fact, with Stephen King, that's the thing that bothered him about The Shining was he felt like it was made by a non-horror fan, right? Mm-hmm. So, but he's a great director and super smart and did one of the greatest horror movies of all time. But he's not so much a fan of the genre, right? And there's a whole bunch that are like that. And there's other directors I don't particularly like, but they're super fans, and that makes me feel bad. Then you got the Eli Roth wing or the Rob Zombie wing, right? So then, but this guy is as good a fan as he is a director. It's perfectly balanced.
Yeah, and like we did an episode one time when I was talking about like the Craven effect, where like when you go to see a Wes Craven movie in the theater at home, like you feel like you have an investment of your time that you're looking forward to.
Totally.
And the only other director I really, really get that with is with Guillermo del Toro. Like I feel like he's the only director who can be like, hey, I imagined something and I want you to see it the way I saw it, and then you get lost in his imagination. Like when I watched Shape of Water and Pan's Labyrinth, like I bought every fucking thing.
Yep.
Like I was totally like the world. I bought it.
Because he totally means it.
That diner the guy was at that he got kicked out of, like I bought that shit too.
Yep.
Same with Pan's Labyrinth, almost everything. Even Hellboy. I love the shit out of that.
Totally.
But like it doesn't happen all the time.
No.
And you know, luckily he won some Oscars for The Shape of Water, finally getting the recognition he deserves. But there's just like
there's a lot of Oscar validation on your side of the list. I see what's happening.
There is, but
good.
But only because I think, you know, a lot of horror fans hate a lot of people hate the Oscars. I personally love it. I love watching the glitz and glam of it.
Totally.
But there is something about like if a horror film does win, it's a plus. To me, that's a plus for horror because that's more people who are going to spend their hard-earned dollars to see something horror-related, which then lets all the companies know that's what we want. But not dumb horror. We want good horror. We want horror that has some thought behind it, some love and passion behind it. And I think when a horror film like Silence of the Lambs, Get Out for the script, and Shape of Water wins, that's a win for us.
Totally.
That's the companies are like, okay, they don't want this overproduced piece of shit.
Totally agree. And his revolution's ongoing.
Exactly, and that's the other thing,
which is cool.
And I think I read that he took a year off to open up an animation studio and like a film scholarship or something like that for kids. Like he's just actively putting out good shit.
But that's also a thing, right? That's a way that you can lead a revolution that isn't obvious to track, but it can happen. You know, like he's going to influence people through his fellowships and through his efforts or whatever. Who knows? We're going to get a director 20 years from now who's going to be the next amazing thing.
Or we're going to get him on the show at one point. I guarantee that. Well, one of these days, you're just going to hear Guillermo del Toro. I'm just going to be like, just say some shit. I'll just fucking listen.
Revolutionary interview, no questions.
Revolutionary. Just say whatever's on your mind, and I'll just eat it up.
No, that's awesome. I love that he's your choice, and I love that he's ongoing, and I think there's amazing turns to that revolution that we haven't even seen yet.
Yeah, he definitely. I mean, he has his staple in the genre, but the thing is it's the Anthony Hopkins thing. Like he made the world recognize like what this genre for. That's why I loved his Oscar speech. Because he mentioned Lon Chaney. That's how often does Lon Chaney
never happens
get mentioned in a Oscar speech?
Nope.
Never.
No.
So, but I think Jordan Peele did, or no, it was Black Mirror during the Emmys. They gave a shout to Rod Serling.
Oh, cool.
That was pretty dope. But that's what I'm talking about. That came from passion. So
totally.
A lot of Oscar, a lot of gold, a lot of passion.
I love it.
Passion for fashion.
A lot of revolutions end in gold.
And fashion.
Sure. Okay. Well, that was fun. I'm glad that we kind of went through this revolutionary. November 5th always gets me in the mood. Like I fire up V for Vendetta, and I'm like, you know what? It's time to cause some trouble.
Well, it's the 5th of November. You got revolutions, and we're coming up on election day tomorrow. So it's just it's impactful.
It's in the air.
Yeah, it's just in there.
Change the world.
It's just in there.
That's right.
Change the world. Make good horror movies.
That's
all you got to do.
That's right.
I feel like that does a lot.
That does a lot.
More than any other genre.
I mean, honestly, that's the thing is when you talk to, that we've talked about this many times about like one of my ways of judging things is the memory of it, how much it sticks in your memory. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And
there's nothing like when a horror movie, when that first scare, I remember right where I was, like the first time of that poltergeist clown came out from under that bed.
Yeah.
Like that horror genre does that in a way that other genres don't. It's just a special thing.
Yeah. Well, hopefully tomorrow is not as scary as some of these films we mentioned.
We shall see.
We shall find out. But until next time, stay scary and watch a bunch of horror movies.
Remember the 5th of November.
Remember the 5th of November. And if you don't, it'll come around next year.
Bye, guys.
Bye.